So today we have a special guest. He is a successful entrepreneur, a family man, and a graduate of the Stanford School of Business. He has counseled companies such as Dell, Apple, and Microsoft, and is currently on the board of directors for Kayak.com and also the Austin Habitat for Humanity. In his current position, he's raised over $400 million in private funding, but at the end of the day, he still has time for himself, friends, and family, and to make a fresh margarita when he gets home. Please welcome Brian Sharples of HomeAway.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Really cool space. I can't wait to tour it. I'm very jealous. But it's great to be here. Google is actually a major partner of ours. Susan Wojcicki, I don't know if you know, is on our board of directors now. And Google Ventures is an investor in our company. And so I know a fair amount about Google. We've worked with them a lot. You guys work for an amazing company. It's obviously the most entrepreneurial big company in the world and certainly the most successful tech company of all time. Facebook might argue that, but I still give it to Google for sure. And so I'm not really sure what I can tell you that Google doesn't teach you because you guys are in such a great environment. But I'll try. I really appreciate being here. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, and so I'm going to talk pretty quickly about just some lessons learned along the way. I'm told that you guys have a long weekend, and so many of you want to scoot out of here as quick as you can. So I'll be relatively brief, and for those of you who want to hang around and ask questions, I'll certainly stay as long as need be. But we're going to start by rolling a little piece of old video.
First in the Bay Area, this is the 10 o'clock news on Channel 2, the #1 primetime newscast in the country.
If you're thinking of buying a car but can't afford a new one, this might be your lucky weekend. Final preparations are underway at San Francisco's Candlestick Park tonight for the grand opening of what's called the International Used Auto Expo.
It's playing host to what's being billed as the world's largest used car sale.
It's being transformed into the world's largest used car showroom.
We got deals. We got everything. We got foreign cars. We got domestic cars. We got it all. Great prices. I'm Crazy Brian, and I'm doing this for a living. Under 30 miles per hour today. This is a lovely wind. It actually feels good. Things are much better. No tents fell down. Nobody's been killed. We haven't had a major fire. The earth has not shaken once. So there are a lot of good things happening.
Most of you were around the room, I don't know, like kindergarten or something at that time, but that was the first, I had done some other stupid business stuff before, but that was the first time I'd ever taken venture money. It was about $1 million that I lost in a matter of 3 hours. It was a big idea like HomeAway. Thought the used car market was all screwed up. I was buying a car at the time, and I had to drive all over San Francisco, and I was like, God, this is such a pain in the ass. There are people, everybody's selling, everybody's buying. let's get them together all at one place, and we'll do it all over the country, so, multiple times a year, so people just don't have to go through this stuff, right? And built this huge thing, and we, built the world's biggest sort of car store on site, mile-long test track, all this kind of stuff. We had like 20 bands playing at this thing. And it actually, all on day one, after about 3 hours of opening, a freak storm came in with about 75-mile-an-hour winds and just completely leveled the place. We had remember we had this big finance operation we built because we were actually making a lot of our money financing cars in this particular deal. And we had this giant tent with about 50 computers. At the time, it was just, like big, fat IBM PCs and all that. Just completely destroyed in San Francisco Bay. And there I was. It was my first deal. I knew I had lost everything. At the end of that was the next day. We actually, with a team of about 500 people, including, I think we grabbed like the University of San Francisco football team and worked all night trying to put it back together. But by the second day, it was pretty clear we weren't going to recoup the money. And so that was my sort of first deal. And then here I am now 20-something years later, and I'm fortunate enough to have a really nice success under my belt with HomeAway, which isn't clearly the success of Google, but it's been a really great ride. And the thing I want to talk about, I guess, the most is how that experience really led to HomeAway being successful today. I was being interviewed yesterday at my home by Entrepreneur Magazine, and they asked me this question, which was, if you had to do it all again based on what you know now, what would you do differently? And my response to them was, I won't do anything differently. I love everything that happened, because the reality is that failing is, in my opinion, and the thing I've learned, is probably the biggest key to success. I love people who have tried big things and failed. And you guys live in a company environment where you're allowed to take pretty big risks, and I know Google is okay with failure, and that's a really, really important thing. And so if you want to click the slide, I think the first, when you're a young entrepreneur, and nobody's probably looking at Google, how many people really don't want to work here but want to start your own company someday? Anybody? Yeah, see, everybody does, right? So, and you probably already have an idea, and there are lots of great ideas out there. I get, ideas all the time. But the thing that I think I learned, very early on from that venture is that ideas are important, and you need to have good ideas, but execution is way more important, clicking to the next slide, than ideas. That execution is everything in business. And most of what I've learned through the failures I've had are to focus very, very heavily on execution. And if you click to the next slide, execution, I think, has a lot to do with not just kind of optimism and being, all entrepreneurs want to think that their business is going to be a huge success. You've got an idea, it's going to be great. You're always forward-thinking, forward-leaning. And I'm that way too. I'm like the eternal optimist. But at that age, all I could think about is what would go right. And everybody who comes to me with a business plan, that's all they ever talk about is what's going to go right. And the projections are always super rosy. But over the years, when you sort of mature at doing this stuff and fail a few times, you learn that probably the most important thing to focus on is not what's going to go right, but what could go wrong. And, it's like being a little kid. You touch the fire on the stove and you're never going to do it again. When negative things happen, it causes this reaction in you where you're just going to work so hard in your life to make sure it never happens again, which is why I love, again, when I hire people, I always ask them, tell me about something you failed at and what did you learn from that? And people who haven't had those failures, don't have those muscles that they flex to be, cautious about things. So, HomeAway was a company that, we knew there was a big opportunity. Here was this vacation rental market. Nobody touched it. It's a worldwide market. It's out there for the pickings. The companies that were in that business, are all relatively small and underfunded. But at the same time, even though we couldn't find a big competitor, when we started building the company, we said, look, okay, we know we can do this. We know we can do a better job. But let's really think through all the things that can go wrong here. And one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs don't think through is they'll look out in the marketplace and say, oh, I got this idea, and nobody else has this product. See, it's fantastic. Nobody else has this. Nobody's doing this. Well, that's an irrelevant question. The question is, if you're successful doing it, who's going to now come in and do it, right? I mean, and most people don't sort of, think that way, but you have to sort of role play and scenario plan for those kinds of things. And so in the case of HomeAway, for example, you know, we knew, and of course the world has really changed now. You come up with a hot idea, and there are people cloning it, you know, left and right as fast as possible. And so one of the things you have to do in today's environment is if you've got a great idea, part of being paranoid is A, staying somewhat quiet. A lot of people like to talk about what they're doing a little too early. With HomeAway, even though we were really successful from the first days, we didn't really say much about the business for the first 3 to 4 years. And our investors would say, well, you know, why aren't you out there in the press doing this and that? We're like, well, because we're not in Germany yet. We're not in France yet. This is a really good business. We don't want to tell anybody about it. And that was sort of part of our paranoia. Part of our paranoia was we knew that we were in a marketplace business, much like Google is, right? If you're searching for stuff, you're going to go to the place where the most relevant results are, and the most relevant results are going to be served by having, you know, the most people using that service and making them better. And so HomeAway is the same thing. We knew that, you know, controlling supply, controlling demand, being the biggest in our business was going to be our key core competitive advantage. So we had to get as big as we could, as fast as we could. You know, conventional wisdom when you're an entrepreneur starting out is, I want to retain as much of the company as I can for myself. I don't want to bring in too many investors or sell. Well, this was one where I just said, you know what, it's either going to work or it's not. And if it's going to work, we have to assume that Expedia is going to come to the business. There was a time when we thought Google would probably come to the business. I don't believe that anymore for a number of reasons. There were, you know, TripAdvisor can come to the business. So let's just assume that's going to happen and run really fast. And run really fast for us meant we don't even have time to build it. We'll build it, and we'll build a platform called HomeAway, but there's already a leader in Germany. Let's go buy them. There's already a leader in France. Let's go buy them. So we ran around the world. The day we opened the company, we bought 5 companies in the first day. But that takes a ton of money, which takes away from equity for me and everybody else who was starting the company. But that was irrelevant to us because, again, it was about managing risk. I will give up equity to manage that risk. So when we said we raised $400 million, I mean, when we did our, I guess it was our 3rd venture round in 2008 of $250 million, I mean, it was the biggest venture round for a tech company in 9 years. And we gave up a lot of equity to do it, but we did it because, again, we were sort of paranoid about making sure we were the biggest, you know, we were going to get there first. I think the other thing that, you know, we did in a very disciplined way as a team was also got very paranoid just managing our money and managing our costs, because that's the other thing that gets a lot of people in trouble. You know, I look at this auto expo business that I was putting together. There was a ton of risks in that I didn't really fully appreciate and understand. One of them was obviously the weather. I should have gone out and bought insurance for the weather. Now, I had done a little bit of research, and the wind had actually never gotten over 70 miles an hour on that day in San Francisco, but sure enough, it did. I probably could have done some things to protect myself. So if you go to the next slide, I think probably the biggest word that comes to mind in terms of, you know, my learnings about how to manage risk is curiosity. Is that you, again, it's such a, people have such a tendency to focus on all the things that go right, but you have to be really curious about the things that can go wrong. And I love when entrepreneurs come to me with business plans and they're curious even about all the things that can go wrong. I hate seeing somebody who's just all about the positive, all about the positive. You have to be intellectually honest that you don't know everything. So curiosity means doing your research. In fact, I remember with HomeAway in the beginning, Carl and I, who founded the business, had a very different idea about how HomeAway would work. And I don't know how much you guys know our business. It's actually a pretty simple business. It's like a classified marketplace. Our biggest site in the world is a company called VRBO. VRBO is a very basic looking site. In fact, it's funny, when I first started getting this business, I remember starting to do my research, and there was VRBO, and I looked at that site, and I said, no, that clearly can't be working. I mean, that thing's awful. And I spent 4 months going down another path, a path of, oh, we're going to build this big integrated online booking system for the vacation rental industry. And then ultimately, we got really curious, and we came back to VRBO, and we said, wait a second, let's count. So they got this many listings, and they're charging this much money. So that's actually a pretty good business. So let's call up their customers, and we called up their owners, and our owners loved them, and we called up the travelers, and the travelers loved them. I hated the site. I got to be honest. I couldn't use it. But it didn't matter. We did enough research. We were curious enough to turn over all the different rocks, and ultimately, we picked a model that everyone, even who was backing us, said, really, that's kind of simple, just classified marketplace. Well, that was the model that was right for the industry. It didn't necessarily feel right to us, but that's what the research told us, and that's what our curiosity told us. So being curious is super important. And then I think, the last big thing is hard to be curious if you aren't humble, which is the next word I'll put up there too, which is you can't, I think, people and teams are so important to businesses. Probably one of my biggest learnings, I think the other, if you go back to Auto Expo, I was doing it all myself. I grabbed a bunch of friends and people I know to help me put the thing together. The operations crew that put the event together were the guys who produced Grateful Dead concerts, because I was a Deadhead at the time and knew some of these guys. Come on, just do this thing. And as you get older and more seasoned, what you start to realize is you can't do everything. You don't have every skill. I've got, on a spectrum of 10 things that you need to do well to run a good business, I maybe have, 1 or 2 of those 10 things. And so you learn to be humble about that, appreciate the things you're good at, appreciate the things you're not good at. If you're going to start a business, starting a business is about a team. And a team really isn't necessarily about friendship. The team should be about complementary skills and about bringing on people who can help mitigate the risks that you're not good at. I hate legal stuff because it's minutia for me and I can't deal with that sort of stuff. I hate the details of accounting. I'm not very good at process. I'm not a programmer, I'm not a developer, I can't do those things. And so, again, with HomeAway, after all those kind of years of doing things, some worked, a little bit, some, this is actually my second public company, some failed. You really start to think hard about building that team, and I think the other right thing we did with HomeAway is we brought in extraordinary people. It's really the thing I admire the most about, I was at Google's Zeitgeist earlier this year and got to meet Sergey and his focus on people and how you guys hire and just how important that is dead on. I mean, congratulations that y'all made the filter. I don't think I would. I don't know how Justin did. He used to work for us, but somehow he slipped through. But the whole people aspect seriously is very important. And I think if you're ever going to go out and raise money and try to start a business, I guarantee you that you will do better if you're humble than if you're cocky. Even, when we were doing that $250 million round, and we closed it actually on the lowest day in the market in the last 9 years. It was right in the financial crisis, and it was when everything, literally burst. And we ended up closing that deal at a very high price, the price that we had negotiated 6 months prior. I held my ground on it, and I remember after that decision was made and it got funded, and there was one very big TCV put in $175 million in that money. And we all went to a bar afterwards to have a beer. And I, now that the thing was closed, I was talking to the partners, I said, man, why didn't you guys, just really put the screws down and, tell us that, we got to do it at half the price or whatever. He said, he said, Brian, I got to tell you, you're the first guy who's come into this office in 10 years who we've asked, how good is your product on a scale of 1 to 10? And you said, I think it's a 3. And I said, we've just never heard that before. We love it. People love to hear that stuff, that there's, you're humble about it. You can get better. So, word of advice, I'd be certainly more inclined to invest, if you do that. And then I really already talked about this, the people and the partners and the importance of all that. And just, again, I think HomeAway has been a dream deal for me because I get to work with, board members I chose and a management team I chose and lots of people I chose. Tiff right here is now a very senior person in our marketing organization. Used to be the nanny for my kids 10 years ago. I mean, it's a real, you get to surround yourself with really terrific people and terrific things are going to happen. So that's really just sort of the formal talk, and I'd be happy to, it wasn't that formal, but take any questions you guys might have about anything.
From the Dory.
Okay.
So I have one from Jeremy. How did you and other founders accelerate the growth and profitability of HomeAway? Was it by transforming the how of what you did and not just what?
Our company's going through phases, and it's still very much an unwritten book. And when people, try to pat us on the back for the success of the company, I don't really like to claim victory yet because I think we're in pretty early stages with the business. Early on, I think what we did is we recognized that there was a good market out there, and we consolidated it, and we did it a lot by acquisition. and we built a technology platform that would allow us to integrate those acquisitions together. But that was so much work to just do that, just to set up an international business that quickly and run around the world doing it, that we frankly haven't had historically a lot of time to focus on how to make it better. That's where we are now. So we've gotten ourselves in a market position where we're clearly the leader in the business. And I'm still of the same opinion when people say, what's the quality of your product or your experience like on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, it was probably a 3 a couple of years ago when we were raising that money. I think we're up to a 5 or a 6, but but you should be, for a business like us, market leader, you should be a 9. I mean, you should be somewhere in that range. So that's really something we're just going to work on now, is how to make the experience as good as it can be. We've set a pretty high bar for that, which is that it should be as easy to find, compare, and book a vacation rental as it is to get a hotel room. And you know how it is to get a hotel room, right? You just dial up Expedia. Every hotel in the world's on there. This one's available. This one's open. Boom, put in my credit card, and I'm done. You cannot do that in our business today. And that is the direction we're moving in, and we're pretty excited about it. But it's going to take us probably 3 to 5 years to get there from now.
So I have another question. I've seen 89 Dead shows. How many have you seen? Where was your first show?
Wow.
And it also says, my first show was November 4th, 1985 in the Centrum in Worcester, Massachusetts.
That's pretty cool. I've probably seen not that many. I don't know, maybe about 17 or 18, most of them California, most of them places like the Greek Theater. There actually used to be a really nice outdoor amphitheater at Stanford, which I don't think they use anymore. I've seen them in Red Rocks. I've seen them in Maine, all over the place. I grew up in New England, went to Stanford, so really in those 2 spots. But 89, that's impressive. I asked them back, how old are they, and can they,
Is Brad in here?
Can they still function intelligently and walk?
Brad? No, Brad? I have another one. Will you share with us your fresh margarita recipe?
Yes, I would be happy to, because I have the same thing every single day when I get home. It's actually the joy of my day. So if you have a pen for this, get it out. This is so you have to, first you need Don Julio Silver. So, highball glass, fill it with ice. Then Don Julio Silver, 1 shot. Cointreau, 1 shot. No substitute. None of this Patron Orange or Grand Marnier or anything. It has to be Cointreau. 1 shot exactly. Then you need 3 key limes. Not, the difference between a key lime and a regular lime. Key limes are the little guys. And you have the big ones. So you do 3 key limes, cut them in half, squeeze them in totally. Then take the 4th one, cut that in half, and just drop those little 2 halves in. Okay? And then an orange, cut it in half, squeeze half an orange in, shake it all up. I'm telling you, you'll have one every day.
Anybody have any questions in the audience want to ask?
Yes.
Brian over here.
You read a lot about business ventures now, and a lot of investors like to see customers before they invest. It sounds like you guys did a lot of your funding before you actually started the business or before day one. How did you go about that, or I guess what ideas do you have in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, we were sort of fortunate in that, just as individuals starting the business, we weren't super financially constrained because we'd, done some stuff before, and I had, had just sold a public company and was taking some time off, and then Carl Shepard, who co-founded with me, used to be the COO of Hoover's, and then they got sold to D&B, and I don't think he was even planning to go to work again. But when we decided to do the business, actually, Austin Ventures committed $50 million to HomeAway, no business plan, just 1 sentence, which is we're going to build the world's largest marketplace for vacation rentals, and they asked us how, and we said we don't know, but we're going to go find out. But they committed the money beforehand, and so we spent, I would say, 4 to 5 months. Our initial mission was, let's kind of search the web, search our contacts, find anybody we can who knows anything about the business. Owners, property managers, people who tried to get into business before and failed. So one of the stories that kept coming up when we were researching this was that Expedia had already tried this. They'd already tried this and they completely failed. And it turned out that there was a company back in 1999 called Vacation Spot that was started by a guy named Steve Murch. And Vacation Spot was VRBO. It was HomeAway. And this was a venture-backed business. And these guys got up to, very quickly, about $1 million in revenue. and Expedia came in. The guy who was running Expedia at the time was a guy named Rich Barton, who went on to found Zillow and some other things. And Rich bought the company for $75 million, which back then was a huge deal. It was 75 times revenue. It was like, you know, one of these spectacular bubble kind of deals. Anyway, a year later, company's completely out of business, gone. And so everybody kept the story. So I didn't know, you know, Barton. So through venture capital, whatever, I said, we got to go see Barton. I got to figure out what the hell happened. And so Barton agreed to meet with us. He's in Seattle. I flew out to Seattle, sat down with him. He was kind enough to actually bring in Merch and the other guys who had that company. And we, you know, said, all right, so you guys already tried, but we're about to try. You know, what the heck happened to the business? And this was how, when I was talking earlier, they said, well, you know, Vacation Spot, it was a great company. It was a subscription business. It was a very simple classified marketplace. And Rich says, you know, we bought it, and we're Expedia. We charge a percentage of revenue. So we basically said to all the customers, forget this subscription. That's now free. You're just going to pay us 15% of bookings. Thing went out of business. Everybody left. And that was exactly what Carl and I were going to do at the time. And so it was, again, just by networking around. So we're just going to go talk to everybody we possibly can. And then during that process of talking to everybody, you know, we ended up meeting, you know, the Europeans who had the strongest business models, you know, people in Brazil had the strongest business models, and they all had the same thing in common. They were all the same. Is that two things in common? Is they kept the model really simple, classified, subscription-based, and they really understood the power of Google. Those were the two things. They really understood the power of Google. So they were all so focused on SEO and so good at SEO. You know, we have now, over time, have had to really diversify our sources of traffic, but that was the winning formula back then. And so, again, I would just say, if you're, you know, starting a company, you can't call, people will see you. Just call people, you know, tell them you're doing research, whatever it is. And if you can find, like we did, a company that actually tried it and failed, that's like the holy grail. Because then, you know, because either you're going to figure out it's not doable because they really tried everything, or you're going to figure out, like we did, see, they just messed with the formula, and they shouldn't have messed with the formula. So.
I just had a quick question. It sounds like most of your background was spent in California, and I was wondering how you got to Austin.
I got to Austin because after business school, I had a ton of debt, and I went to work for Bain & Company, which is a consulting firm, and I was in their San Francisco office. And I had two clients in the short time I was there. One was Baxter Travenol in Chicago, and the other was Dell Computer, before they were even public. Dell was the smallest company that Bain had ever taken on. We actually did an equity for work deal with them, and I was the head of that team. So I would, every Sunday night, I would fly down to Austin, Texas, and I would go to the Arboretum and sit at the Fridays in a particular spot in the bar. The guy wouldn't even have to say anything. He'd give me a beer and a thing of fried clams. It's so gross. They don't even have it anymore. But I said, and then I would stay Monday, Tuesday, and then fly up to Chicago, go to Baxter Travenol a couple days, go back to San Francisco. And in the process, you know, I got to know a lot of people from Dell. I go out in the lake, go water skiing, this kind of thing, you know, and ultimately I just got sort of hooked on Austin and, you know, came down a couple of years later. So I've been here now more than I've been anywhere, you know, over 20 years.
I have an answer to one of your questions and then a quick question. So the answer to your question is Brad Askins is the deadhead who asked the original questions. He's on our SketchUp team. And he wanted to mention that he was on 2 tours. And to your question of how's he feeling, he said he's still seeing trails.
Good. Excellent.
My question was, you mentioned that there's probably 10 skills that it takes to make a successful business, and you hold 1 or 2 of those. Yeah. What would you say those skills are for you?
Oh, for me, it's actually, I think there was a word behind this, so I didn't click one more. I'm sorry, I put it together like 5 minutes before I came here. But the next word is passion. So one of them is, despite the fact that I, counsel people to be humble, you do have to be super passionate about something. And so I do get passionate about things that I want to do. So A, I've got that skill. The second is, I think I'm a very good communicator when I'm passionate, which means that I'm able to get other people really excited about what I'm excited about, because it does take a village. And if you can't get other people excited about it, it's really hard to be successful with something. So, which sort of all adds up in a weird way to maybe being a good salesman, sort of. Not that I've ever gone out and sort of been a salesman, but that's sort of what being a CEO is, right? You're trying to get everybody to go along with your ideas. When you're going out to acquire these companies, all these businesses we acquired, these people were making tons of money. They must sell their businesses. They had no interest, but I had to sell them on the fact that if they did not sell it to us, there was a wave that would swamp them at some point, 4 to 5 years down the road, because we were going to go buy everybody else, and there was going to be a global system, and if they weren't part of that global system, but I'm this outsider just saying this. I didn't have anything at the time. So that is, that's my sort of, biggest skill, right? I'm creative, I paint, I play guitar, stuff like that. I have an analytical side to me, thankfully, so I can, do spreadsheets and that stuff, but I don't have a lot of patience for it. Accounting, legal, process, other things. As we get bigger, I get sort of more annoyed with, just all the bureaucracy that I'm sure exists here at Google too. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Hi, I have 2 questions actually. The first is, we just learned that, you guys are based here in Austin. Great choice on the location, by the way. But I know that you guys are kind of all over
and we
the
are
world.
hiring.
What's that?
We are hiring. So.
That was going to be my next question. I just kidding. But you do have locations around the world. In fact, my best friend's wife works for your office in Brazil, or
cool.
one of your partners in Brazil. Yeah. So my question is, how did you decide to expand? What was that critical point where you thought, okay, we need to be in more countries? And how did you hopefully avoid, falling into the trap of expanding too quickly and spreading yourself thin? I've worked for a company that did that, so she did too.
The decision to expand internationally was just a pretty natural fit with the business. So we're in the travel business. Just think, for example, if you went to Expedia and, you're about to go to Madrid and you type in, Madrid looking for a hotel and it says, oh, sorry, we don't do Madrid. You'd be like, well, that's kind of weird. You're Expedia. You should do Madrid, right? So it's a worldwide business, and by definition, we have to cover most of the major vacation spots around the world. So expanding to places like Europe makes a lot of sense. South America, et cetera. We're still not in Asia. We have lots of places to go. And so the first day that we opened our doors, we acquired both companies in the U.S. and Europe right from day one. Now, the challenge in terms of how you manage all that's pretty big. You've got to have the right cultural fit and everything else. And one of the things we've worked really hard on is communications. We were another awesome company here called LifeSize. A friend of mine started that was a pioneer in high-definition video conferencing. And for a small startup company, you don't usually invest in that stuff, but we invested in it from day one. So we put in an office, we put in big 60-inch monitors, we've got high-definition video conferencing, because it's just so important for people to communicate and touch base. We're also pretty diligent about making sure that the companies we acquire, English is the primary, not the primary, but that the founders of those companies speak really good English. If they don't, they don't make sense to be there. If the staff doesn't speak English, we send in English teachers just because we need to, have that communication. Now, in terms of expanding, you're absolutely right. We have been, at times I felt like we've been on the borderline because, one of the things that's happened to us when you buy multiple companies in multiple languages, they come with multiple platforms in multiple languages. All those different platforms add complexity and cost. We had about 14 different platforms in the business. We're now down to 4. We're about to be down to 3, hopefully within a couple months. We have a goal in a year of being down finally to 1 platform. That almost broke us, just from a technology perspective, from a people perspective, from a, now that we're public, from a SOX compliance perspective. You think of all these platforms and you got to manage all the security holes and risks and finance stuff and everything else. And so for that reason, we're not in Eastern Europe, we're not in Africa, we're not in Asia, we're not in China, we're not in Japan. So we've had to meter it a bit. And we this past year, we haven't made any acquisition in the last 12 months. And the reason we didn't is because we were taking the company public, and that was just another big sort of strain on the whole thing. So we have, it's funny, part of our public story, we're a little bit unique. You got people out now, whether it's Facebook coming out, people like Pandora, LinkedIn, others, who are really in the business right now of spending as much money as they can to get as much top-line growth as they can. And we've taken a very different approach with the market and have been rewarded, I think, with a pretty good multiple, which is we're a little bit different. We're the disciplined guys. So we're going to deliver really steady 30% growth in this business, and we're going to make money And we're not going to dump everything we can. Sure, we could grow the business faster if we put everything into growth, if we open offices all over the world. And there are a lot of internet companies that do that. That's just not our thing. Again, it comes back to that little video in the beginning. I got my finger burned, and so I operate in a much more risk-averse environment. But there's a group of investors who love that, and especially today. That's what they want to hear. So that's the guys we cater to. There are other people who want growth at all costs, and they go invest in people like Pandora, I guess. Yeah.
Sorry if you answered this earlier. I apologize in advance. But so when you guys were first starting out, what was your biggest challenge in creating a following for HomeAway when you were brand new, and what kind of tools did you use to gather users and subscribers?
Most of the early days of this company was being really good at SEO. I mean, we've got Google to thank clearly for a big chunk of our traffic. Then, and that was sort of the first couple of years. Then we found religion with paying you guys lots of money on top of that, right, to goose it. So, so then we pay for that. Then we got religion around recommendations and I'll talk about social in a minute, around really sort of milking our customer base. So we got very sophisticated about email marketing, for example. So, you got millions of people coming in. How do you make sure they come back every year? Every time you inquire about a house on HomeAway, we know a lot about you. We know what you like. We know when you want to travel and things like that. And so we have a very sophisticated now email program to really keep that flywheel going. 3 years ago, I decided that wasn't enough, and it was time for us to start building our brand. And so we did 3 years ago start doing brand marketing. We're still not big enough to do a huge amount of it, but we started in a big way. We started with the Super Bowl, 3 years ago. We brought back the Griswolds from, vacation fame. In fact, we just opened a new office at Penfield on South Congress, where the Truckster has its final resting place in a fake garage inside of that office. And that was sort of a kickoff. Then a year later, we did something really stupid. We had an ad where a baby got thrown against a window, and then I had to apologize to the world, and we pulled that ad. But then we got so much publicity from doing that it wound up being as good as the Griswolds. And then this year, we finally decided to get out of the Super Bowl game and start getting into the consistency game, right? And to develop a message that was timeless and that we could go with for a long time, that we could run, and build over, campaign seasons as opposed to one event like the Super Bowl. And it's something I'm really excited about. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's our new tagline for the company is "Let's Stay Together," because we're all about families and friends getting together in houses. And the famous Al Green song "Let's Stay Together" that Obama was singing just a few months ago has now been licensed to us, so we use that music in the song. In fact, on April the 26th, we are bringing Al Green to town, who's going to play down at ACL. So any Al Green fans who want to come to that show, it's the first time he's played in 2 years, first time he's ever played in Austin. And so, that's now how we do it. As far as social is concerned, we're spending a lot of time on social as well, but we haven't really found the magic bullet on social. One thing I'll tell you guys that you should take great comfort in is that we have been working very hard to replicate the ROI we get from advertising on Google by advertising on Facebook. And we got a very sophisticated crew of people that come out of eBay that's testing this stuff every day and all the time. As of about a year ago, I reported to my board that we had gotten the cost of Facebook advertising down to 300 times the cost of advertising on Google. About a year later, with a lot of work, we've gotten down to Facebook being about 50 times the cost of advertising on Google. And so you can feel pretty secure that at least for a business like HomeAway, we have not yet found, I mean, people go on social platforms like Facebook to do other things than, look at advertisements. And for us, when you have a product where somebody is only maybe twice a year going out, right? So you take a couple of vacations a year, and you may have a 2 or 3 day planning window for each of those vacations. So 6 days a year, we can't, the 50 to 1 numbers actually make sense because just randomly, it's hard to sort of hit those people exactly where in their process. But with Google, of course, they go to the web and type in vacation rental, looking for a place in Maui, whatever it is, and we can hit them really efficiently. So social still hasn't been a big thing for us, although we continue to do a lot of work in that area, and maybe someday it will. Maybe Google Plus will answer for us.
Hi, Brian. First of all, let me just say it's great to have you here. Actually, my group works directly with you guys through Stephen Goldberg. So I'm formerly with DoubleClick. My question to you is very simple, actually, is how has the mortgage crisis hurt or helped HomeAway?
I think it's hurt and helped, and they've offset each other. So if you look at new listings that come into our business, and they come in at a rate of 30, 40,000 listings a quarter that get added to the pool. Going back 3-4 years ago, a huge percentage of those were new. So not necessarily new units, but new buyers in the market. So the vacation market prior to the mortgage crisis was very hot. So people were using cheap debt to buy second homes. And it's just as it turns out, and so then developers are building new homes, and about 25-30% of those people would just rent them out, to help pay those bills. So that sort of tap shut off. In fact, the numbers, this is how dramatic they are. There were about 1.2 million vacation homes being sold a year up until 2008. That number is now about 400,000 a year. So it's that bad. Now, the flip side is that because expenses have gotten higher for people, and part of the mortgage crisis was, remember, people's interest rates adjusting and all that kind of stuff. They were paying nothing, and now they actually have to pay interest. People who have existing homes have been more inclined to rent them out because they need the money. And that install base is actually pretty big. In the US and Europe, there's about 20 million people who own vacation homes. And remember today, HomeAway, well, we're not just in the US and Europe. There's a majority of our listings. We have 650,000 homes right now, but there's 20 million of them out there. And if you go back 4 or 5 years ago when we would survey it, about 25% of the second homeowners in the US and Europe rented. That number is closer to 30-31% today. So it's just been trending up year after year. And the two just have kind of offset each other, and the bottom line is we haven't really seen a huge impact in our trajectory because of it.
Brian, thank you for coming today. Earlier you mentioned that you went to business school, and I've read a lot of literature that argues that business school may or may not be the best fit for entrepreneurs. Maybe they should just jump in. Could you maybe speak a little bit about that and your thoughts on how business school did or did not help you?
Yeah, I've thought at times about writing a book, and somebody once did what they never taught me at the Harvard Business School or something like that. If it's Harvey McKay or who wrote that book, but I feel that way a lot. That business school was highly academic, and when you get out in the real world, most of what I've learned, I feel like I've learned sort of pure trial by fire, and I can't really go back and say, God, if it weren't for this class, I never would have been successful. So that part of it, I'd say, is true. The flip side is I was lucky enough to get into Stanford Business School, and Stanford Business School, as is Harvard Business School, and maybe there are a few others as well, comes not just with education, but with some pretty damn good connections. So if you look at my board, for example, Jeff Brody with Redpoint was one of my buddies at business school, became one of the biggest venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, him along with Jeff Yang and John Walechka and his partners, who also went to Stanford Business School. These guys are all friends of mine. He's on my board. John Marani from Trident is one of our early investors who's on our board from Stanford Business School, was one of my friends at business school. Not that I couldn't have gotten financing without those guys, but because of those relationships, I got to tell you, it's a lot easier. There's a lot more trust. I get to work with friends, that I know, and so there's a network there, at least out in California, that being here in Austin would be pretty hard to be tapped into if I hadn't gone there. So I donate money to school, and I thank them every day. But it's not necessarily because what I learned in the classroom is the part that I'm applying to my life at this point, if that makes sense.
Brian, thank you. I've talked to a lot of people that have been employed by HomeAway, and they all say that their hiring process was very unique, and they felt like they were hired as the individual rather than filling a specific position, and that you take a real pride in the people that you work for and finding, I guess, new opportunities for them inside your organization. Can you speak to the benefit of hiring for individuals rather than filling positions?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard anyway that nobody does that better than Google. So my guess is we're pretty similar in that regard, except that I'm not sure we give people like brain teasers or math tests or things like that. But yeah, no, fit's the most important thing for us. I mean, we really do have a really good group of friendly people who like to work together, and we stress for everybody that the fit has to be right. Like the number one thing I can't stand is ego, as I talked about. We like humble people who don't have big egos, and so that is as important to us as somebody's background. And I think it's for exactly the reason you say. When you're a company that's growing fast, the positions are just going to change constantly. I mean, you're constantly having to evolve and move people into different places. And so what you hire people for in the initial job ends up being pretty irrelevant in a growth company. And so you look for, the term people use are good athletes. You're looking for good athletes as opposed to somebody who's really good at a specific thing. I don't know if we have any magic formula and do it, that much better than anyone else. I don't think we necessarily train people on you have to ask these kinds of questions. I think we've just hired the kind of people who instinctively know that that we want to continue to hire against our culture, and it seems to have worked out pretty well.
I have one final question. What is one of the craziest listings you've seen on your HomeAway?
I don't know, Eileen, you may know better than me, craziest listing. People have listed some pretty... Oh, that's the best. Yeah, that's the best. So, right. So people. VRBO actually, we bought it. This was it was a very religious company actually. It was it was founded by a guy who was part of this church, and almost everyone in the company when we bought it was part of this church. And it's a pretty conservative deal. They don't drink. They don't. And so they, people sometimes when they submit photos, will just put photos of themselves in bikinis or on the beach or whatever, and they didn't even allow bikini, no way. They would just edit all that stuff out. Well, then we bought the company, and people started doing really tricky things. People like to see themselves naked online, I guess, where they do things like there'd be a room, and then there'd be a mirror in it, and then you'd see in the mirror them sort of naked in the background. So those are the funniest things that happen. And when it happens, I hate to say it, it does get passed around. So makes our day. Yeah.
You mentioned stuff that you're involved in, maybe investing or part of startups. Are you actively looking for startups, and which ones are you already a part of? And maybe can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, my time is not. I don't have a lot of, free time at the moment to put a lot into stuff. So, but I have a sweet spot for people who like to do entrepreneurial things, and I love to take their phone calls. I love to help them. I speak a lot to entrepreneurs, and if there are business plans out there I get excited about, then I do put money into things. And there's a combination of several small private things that people are working on and don't necessarily want to disclose yet. And then I look for in Austin things to get involved with that I think are pretty hot. There's a deal here in town. You mentioned I was on the board of Kayak. I'm also on the board of a company called Whale Shark Media here in town. You may have heard of. And Whale Shark is, I would call it a quasi-HomeAway spin-out because it was started by two guys, Carter Cunningham and Justin Halloran. Justin was one of our senior guys who came out of eBay and decided, to go do Whale Shark because it was a good opportunity for him. And so I invested in that company. I'm working with that company. I think it's a very hot company that's going to be a huge success, and I'm pretty excited about it. And Google Ventures is in that company as well. They, because of our relationship, came in, and it's been wonderful. So yeah, that's something cool. I love to hear about it.
Well, I want to thank everybody for showing up today, and we want to give you a Google Awesome T-shirt on behalf of.
I was actually jealous. There's so many people wearing Google stuff. People are never wearing HomeAway stuff. We don't give out enough, I guess. Anyway, thank you. That's wonderful. I appreciate it. Oh, I spoke. Y'all. Pretty hip. Cool. Thanks.